Hey everybody, it's the 90s kid, and today we're gonna be talking about Nintendo's legacy content offering on the Nintendo Switch. And how it's just look, it could be better, okay? It could be better. That's where we're going with this. And look, before we get into this, I'll just be honest with you. If you could leave a like, that is very much appreciated. Also, leave me a comment. What's your fudge? I don't know. What's your favorite retro Nintendo console of all time? Mine's the Super Nintendo, maybe the Nintendo 64. Let me know in the comments. Just engage with me, please. Anyways, my fellow 90s kids, it has been about 2 months since the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack launched, and it's... I'm sorry about that, guys. That's my Tamagotchi going off. Sorry, bear with me, I'm just gonna take care of this. I'm a man of responsibility. Oh, yeah, the little guy was just sleepy. Went ahead and turned off the lights. Anyways, let's get back on track. The launch didn't go great, alright? Beforehand, people weren't too thrilled about the price hike. It didn't look like it was a particularly great value. I made a video about how I didn't think it was a great value. And then I made a plan to do like a comparison of all of the launch titles, the Nintendo 64 launch titles, but everybody's done that now. I mean, I don't know, here's some Ocarina of Time. Oh my gosh, look at the Deku Tree. It's not obscured by fog, so it looks horrible. Oh my gosh, look at Goma. It's not obscured in any way, shape, or form. It's just a clear picture. Gets rid of all the atmosphere. Oh, they ruined it. Everybody knows that. The emulation is not particularly good. Now, in Nintendo's defense, they have only been emulating Nintendo 64 games since the early 2000s on the GameCube. So they can't be expected to knock this out of the park right out of the gate, right? And it's not like Nintendo has enough money or manpower or the insider information to be able to engineer a really, really high quality emulator. I mean, and look, you may say that, hey, there's all these open source emulators that people have made basically in their free time for, you know, like, no money that work better than the emulator that Nintendo has pushed out. But cut them a break. Yeah, look, the emulation is not great. And it's not just visuals. Controls are also a little bit off. Although, I don't know how much of that is the fault of the emulator and how much of that is the fault of the Joy-Cons and the Nintendo Switch Online Nintendo 64 controller. I've noticed when using them that the analog controls for the analog stick are almost too sensitive. When I use my Pro controller, it's not quite as bad, and I think that's because the analog stick in the Pro controller has a little bit better range of motion. It's not all bad though. I want to make that clear. It is not all bad. The up-resed versions of these games can look great. Star Fox, for instance, looks great. I mean, look at the cockpit. Did you know that their hands were just sort of painted on and they're flat and they look like they're too long and that possibly they're Lego hands? I didn't know that because you couldn't see that in the muddy picture on the original game. I mean, my gosh, how lucky are we that we get to see this? We get to witness this now. And in the Ocarina of Time, you can see the seams between the bitmap tiles that they've used to make the background. I sound like I'm being sarcastic, but that is actually kind of cool to me because I can kind of see how they constructed the game back in the day. Let's take a look at the sequel to Mario RPG, Mario RPG 2, except now some stuff is made of paper. But not all the things are made of paper because that might get a little bit tired. This game looks incredible! Look, the emulation is hit and miss. Some of the games it looks fine, some of the games it doesn't, some of the games have pretty good control, some of the games don't. The Nintendo 64 controller that Nintendo released doesn't work as well as I would hope. Like I said before, the analog stick just doesn't feel right. All of that's, you know, not great, but the really not great thing here is I have no idea where this service is going. Because as it stands right now, it's not worth $50 a year. For 9 Nintendo 64 games, $50 a year is too much. And what I don't like is that Nintendo is being very cagey about when they're going to release more games. Nintendo, Microsoft has the Game Pass, which is an incredible deal. PlayStation's working on their own thing. You are running out of time. And look, you have this advantage that no other company has. You've got this ridiculous back catalog of games. Why are you holding them back? Like, if there were 20 Nintendo 64 games and a whole bunch more Super Nintendo and NES games available right now, I have no doubt that you would have no problem getting a crap ton of subscribers. Because at the end of the day, the more content you have on a subscription service, the better it is. Look at Disney Plus for that first year. Yeah, The Mandalorian was great, and it definitely drew people in, but they also had a whole bunch of other nostalgic classics on there, so that people wouldn't cancel their subscription immediately after The Mandalorian's first season ended. I think over the last year and a half or so, it's become very apparent that Nintendo has struggled to adjust to working with the pandemic. I don't think they had the ability to go to a majority of their employees being remote workers, because they're such a traditional Japanese company. And so as a result, their game output has slowed down considerably. And I'm wondering if Nintendo is feeling like, because they have somewhat of a more sparse release schedule, that they can produce hype by releasing old Nintendo 64 games at a drip. But I just don't think that's a great strategy. And as the years go by, as the months go by rather, the Switch becomes more and more outdated. I mean, let's be honest, the Switch was basically a generation behind when it launched back in 2017, and now it's kind of 2 generations behind. So they need a different draw. And like Disney, Nintendo has, well, a great amount of nostalgic content that they could be giving their customers. I just feel like there is this void that needs to be filled in terms of content, and the best way to fill that void would be to allow us the ability to play more of their retro titles. Imagine being able to have access to all of the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, heck, maybe even some of the DS games, as well as many of their home console games, you know, NES, SNES, Nintendo 64, and if we're really, you know, just going pie in the sky dreams, maybe some GameCube games as well. Having that large library keeps people playing their Switch, even when you have a sparse release schedule. So as third-party support of the Switch begins to dwindle a little bit because it becomes too difficult to get their games running on this aging hardware, Nintendo is still providing a good amount of content to their customers, even if they can't get their own AAA titles out as quickly as they may want. The Switch is in a really good spot right now, and nobody's arguing that. But just because it's in a good spot now doesn't mean it's going to be in a good spot 6 months down the line. I know it's selling very well, and it may seem kind of silly to be sounding the alarm, but I'm thinking about the long term here, and for the long-term health of Nintendo, they need to get their legacy content available, and they need to stop keeping it locked away from their customers. But, you know, also take all this with a grain of salt, because I was an English major in college. I didn't take a single business class. I have no interest in business or in economics, so, you know, this whole thing was a waste of time, I think. Oh well. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Leave me a comment if you did. Subscribe if you enjoyed this. Or if you didn't enjoy it, also subscribe, because then you can leave a mean comment on every video I release. It's a win-win. Heads up, down the line, I've got a video that I'm working on about the life of Masayuki Uemura, the designer of the NES. He passed away recently, and I wanted to do a little bit of a story of his life, so you can look forward to that. And I'm also working on a video about the history of Tamagotchi. So that's why you heard a Tamagotchi at the beginning of the video. Okay, love you guys. Bye.